When those of us that were here on the island studying with Sid in the early years, we observed him and how he was basically self-taught. And when I say self-taught, I mean the big S, the inside self, wisdom, God. And he taught himself. Wisdom taught him how to share. And so he came from that space, that formless space in his sharing, and his words were the form. And he would say, that's why he said always, over and over, it's not in my words. Don't listen to my words. It's like, listen for the feeling. As time went on, when Sid was invited to travel off the island to other cities in the United States, to talk at some universities, to talk at some of the faculty clubs of a university, and sometimes there'd be other new professors that would, sit in as well as other mental health people. And again, I'd observe him, okay, now he's off the island, what's his teaching going to look like? And it was the same, like it came from that incredible, formless wisdom inside. And sometimes he might even start off by saying, like he did yesterday at the beginning of the tape, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. And he's so relaxed in his not knowing, like you kind of think, oh, he's putting me on, he's putting me on. But like in that moment, he meant it. I don't know what I'm going to talk about, he'd say. And in that honesty that comes from our spiritual nature, that wisdom before form, out it would pour. Fast forward to the point where I'm starting to do more teaching on my own, sharing that one little insight that I had, that when Sid said, dearie, if you want to start off here at this university, and then I'll come in after. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified to share, because now we're no longer on the island where I felt somewhat comfortable, but now we're in front of, 70, 80 people who are professionals, and I'm a housewife. So why would they listen? And so I was terrified, but when I got on the stage, and I honestly will say that I blathered nonsense for about 5 minutes, and then something landed for me. I remembered Sid saying, share what you know. And the only thing I knew was thought creates feeling. And in that insight I shared with the audience, I found happiness that I didn't know existed. Be honest. When you don't know what to do, be honest. Because honesty just automatically comes from our true nature, our spiritual nature. Do you see the point? How we get taught. Nobody ever said to me, watch the form, that you don't get too caught up in the form. Sid never said that. He never taught me in that way. Like he never ever said, don't do too much form. He said, stick to the feeling, and I suspect that he assumed we'd get it from that. That when he's saying like it's the feeling that's the educator. So it's not the words, that he kind of assumed, well, we won't go into too much form. He just trusted us. And then later, like he would find out that, oh, okay, they didn't get it. Like on that tape yesterday, and the teacher was saying, the students don't get me. And he says, well, how do you think I feel? Where he'd leave the room and he'd say, just keep the feeling nice. That's where the power is. Like, don't get into your problems. And he'd come back in, and we'd been into the problems. And he'd go like, they don't get it. They don't get it. And then we would get it. And so it's that interplay between the formless and the form, and the down-to-earthness. Because sometimes when we talk about the formless and the oneness, I know at least for me, it used to be so over my head, I didn't get it. But I got a feeling for it. I got a feeling that there's something here. I don't know what it is, but I got a feeling for it, and that's enough. That's enough. So I would be comfortable in not knowing, because the feeling was enough. But it's that feeling that teaches us. And then it started to come out of me a little bit more, where I could get a deeper sense of it. And when I said to Sid one day, like a year or so before he passed, and he was saying, so Chip was there too. It's really time, he said, to move past what the principles do. You know, that mind is the spiritual energy of life, of everything in this world that we can see and feel and beyond. It's that spiritual energy behind life and life. And consciousness is our awareness of life. And Sid always connected with soul. When you read his books, and The Missing Link in particular, he always linked consciousness to soul. And to me, that added such another layer of depth. Because soul is understanding. Soul is spiritual. Soul is understanding what we are. Spiritual energy. That's consciousness. And I know in the Three Principles community that oftentimes people will just kind of repeat, consciousness brings our thinking to life. Yes, it does. That's like the form. Now you're looking at the form. It's looking at our experience. And that's powerful to know. But I keep coming back to, in addition to that, and in addition to Sid saying, it's simple, awareness of our experience. And then he carries on and he says, and soul. And he talks about, in The Missing Link, about soul, that in the early days of psychology, it was a study of the soul. And he found that out from the doctors that he was working with, when they kind of broke it down for him. You know, what made up that word? Psyche, logical. Psyche was the soul. And Sid says in his book that, and then they missed it because they stopped teaching about soul. And it just became more like the logic of our mental workings. And we've lost our spiritual workings, which drive the psychological workings. And then thought is our power to create our experience. We're the drivers. Like, our experience isn't happening because of what's happening out here, which is what I used to think. I'm unhappy because my kids are failing in school. I'm unhappy because my husband keeps burning his coveralls when he's welding, and I have to keep trying to patch them this is in the early days. You know, my unhappiness was not a result of me. My unhappiness was a result of them. I didn't know that I was using thought, the power of thought, to create my unhappiness. Because after that, the evidence for me was, when I had the insight about thought creates feeling, when Ken would come home with his coveralls burned, it was like, oh, great, okay, I'll wash them. And gee, would you mind if I embroidered a flower on the hole? Well, he drew the line at that. He said, no, I love you, hun, but no butterflies and no roses on my coveralls. I would never make it when I went back to work. And so it's the same situation, but now my love is clear. It's unconditional. So that's thought. I'm the driver rather than the victim of my circumstances. That's the three principles. You see how simple, how down to earth that is? And it doesn't matter now. It's taken me this long, 44 years, to be able to say it this simple. For a number of years, the only principle I could share was thought. Mind, it was like, no, too much for me. Consciousness, oh, too much for me. And then gradually, as my understanding blossomed from the inside out, I had insights about consciousness that I could then share. Because it was real to me then. And then I had insights about mind, because when Sid was talking to Chip and I about the school, he was saying, it's not about what they do, it's about their nature. You know, it's valuable what they do, yes, but now at this stage, move more and more into what they are. What's the nature of the principles? What's the nature of life? Your nature, your spiritual nature. Look there. Talk from there as best as you can. I don't know how to describe the nature of thought, of mind, of consciousness. I don't know. And Sid said to me, like, how would you describe it? I don't know, Sid. And the only thing I could say to him is I have a feeling for that, for the nature. I have a feeling for the nature. I have a sense of it. Good. That's good. That's enough. Like that. That's enough. Share that. And I'll never forget this. I shared this with someone yesterday because I said, when he said that to me, it went like fireworks in my mind. The simplicity and the profundity. He said, that sense you have of the nature of the principles of life, of you, of humanity, is a degree of knowing. Knowing. And that's enough. And that's enough. One last little example, and then I'm done. Life's assignments, how life, via divine mind, teaches us. The next day after this conversation that Chip and I were having with Sid about, move more into the nature of the principles, not so much what they do. I get a phone call from a top-level executive of a company that I've been working with for quite a while. And he and I had a strong relationship. And he'd grown a lot. He was VP of operations. He'd grown a lot and really helped a lot of people in the union at work and so on. But he was really struggling because it was during the time when the kind of corporation they were in a downsizing mode. It was like 2008, and they were having to really downsize and let go of a lot of their people. And he was struggling with it, being VP of operations. He was really struggling. His heart, having to let go of long-term people and take a look at the medical plans and see how they could, maybe lessen the medical plans and things like that were very difficult. And he said, Elsie, I'm really gripped by my thinking. And I said, I know that. I'm really gripped by my thinking. And it's not helping me right now. He said, I know it's my thinking, but that's not working for me anymore. Do you have anything else you can offer me? Anything else, he said, in your bag of tricks? Sid's words came to mind. I'll call him Bob. And I said, well, Bob, when I say to you, what do you feel is the nature of the principles of life, of yourself, of humanity? What does that bring to mind for you? Because I didn't know what to say. So I asked him the question, what would you say? Long pause. And then he came back and he said, it feels spiritual to me. It feels spiritual. My God. Like, this is a VP of operations saying to me, his coach, what I couldn't say? He was my teacher. It just opened the door for a conversation the likes of which we'd never had in the maybe 2-3 years I've been working with him, about the nature of the principles and of life. And we got into wonderment. Instead of looking at his thinking and how to move past his thinking, it was so beyond that. We moved into wonderment that we could explore our true nature and the meaning of that. The formless and the form. Life's assignments. Our own best teacher.